Hello everyone, let's start the anatomy of the rectum. First thing to understand is the location of the rectum, the fact that it is located in the posterior part of the lesser pelvis. Now the lesser pelvis is the part of the pelvis of the pelvic cavity below the pelvic brim, right? So that is the location of the rectum in the pelvic cavity. In this image, you can see the rectum labeled in this manner, and it happens to be in front of the lower three pieces of the sacrum and the coccyx. So you can quite clearly see that over here too. Let's talk about the extent. The rectum begins as a continuation of the sigmoid colon. What does it do? It begins as a continuation of the sigmoid colon, and this we can see quite clearly, and it does so at the level of the third sacral vertebra, right? So it is a continuation of the sigmoid colon at the level of the third sacral vertebra. All right. And then there's a rectosigmoid junction, which you can quite clearly see in this image, right? This is a rectosigmoid junction, is indicated by the lower end of the sigmoid mesocolon. And you know the sigmoid mesocolon is the mesentery that basically suspends the sigmoid mesocolon from the posterior abdominal wall, and this junction is indicated by the lower end of the sigmoid mesocolon. Where does the rectum end? By becoming continuous with the anal canal at the anorectal junction. Where does it end? It ends by becoming continuous with the anal canal at the anorectal junction, right? And this is the anorectal junction, and this junction happens to lie 2 to 3 centimeters in front of and also slightly below the tip of the coccyx, right? And in this image you can see quite clearly that the anorectal junction is 2 to 3 centimeters anterior and a little below this point over here, which is the tip of the coccyx. Now let's talk about the dimensions. What are the dimensions? What are the dimensions of the rectum? The length is very important, and the length is about 12 centimeters. This is a very important value to kind of get a hang of. So let's take it from here till this point, and this is about 12 centimeters, and this is the length of the rectum. It's a very important value. In the upper part, it has the same diameter as that of the sigmoid colon. So in the upper part, the diameter of the rectum is the same as that of the sigmoid colon, and the average value is about 4 centimeters, and you can see 4 centimeters is a big value. So 12 centimeters is the length, and the width in the upper part is 4 centimeters, same as that of the sigmoid mesocolon. Now let's talk about the course and the direction. The rectum is running downwards and backwards. So you have to be able to tell that initially it is running downwards and backwards, as you can quite easily see, both downwards as well as backwards, यानी नीचे की तरफ भी और पीछे की तरफ भी, and बाद में it is going to go downwards, यानी सिर्फ vertical descent और फिर downwards और सामने की तरफ भी. This is just downwards, and this is downwards and forwards. Downwards and backwards, just downwards and then downwards and forwards. जो beginning है ना, meaning the beginning of the rectum as well as the end of the rectum, both are in the median plane. Alright? So the beginning of the rectum and the end of the rectum are in the median plane, but the rectum does show curvatures. Now there are the anteroposterior curvatures and there are also the lateral curvatures, right? There are 2 anteroposterior curvatures which are very important. One is the sacral flexure and the other is the perineal flexure. So we have to consider a total of 2 flexures. The sacral flexure, number 1, and number 2, we need to consider the perineal flexure. The sacral flexure of the rectum follows the concavity of the sacrum and that of the coccyx. So that does make sense. I'll have to kind of label it to show it. Right, so this is the right, so in the anteroposterior direction we have two curves. The sacral flexure is the first one to consider and the second is the perineal. Right, now the sacral flexure of the rectum follows the concavity of the sacrum and the coccyx. This is the concavity of the sacrum and the sacral flexure is basically following that concavity, as you can see, of the sacrum and the coccyx. There is also the perineal flexure, which happens to be located at the rectal junction. And why is it present? Because at that point there is a backward bend, but I'll show you that in another color. This is the perineal flexure at the rectal junction where there's a backward bend. Right, now let's talk about the lateral curves. We have three of those: an upper, a middle, and a lateral. Let me just show you. The upper is convex to the right, the middle is convex to the left, and the lower is convex to the right. And first of all, let me orient you properly. It's already done, वैसे तो, right and left. Alright, now let me show you the first lateral flexure, the upper lateral flexure, because it is laterally as opposed to anteroposteriorly. And this is, as you can see, this is to the right. And this is basically the whole of this portion right over here. Like this is the lateral flexure, first one. Now the second one, the middle lateral flexure, is convex to the left, right? And it's like this. My apologies. Right? And the third, which is the lower lateral flexure, is convex to the right again. And it's very interesting, to be honest. It's like this. So we have a first, we have a second, and we have a third. We have the upper lateral flexure, the middle lateral flexure, and the lower lateral flexure. The upper lateral flexure is convex to the right, like this. This is the first one. Alright. The middle lateral flexure is convex to the left, and the lower lateral flexure is convex to the right again. So I think I've successfully shown that. Now let's talk about the various peritoneal relations. In this image you can quite clearly see the peritoneal relations.